let's welcome Margaret and Meghla on stage. Thank you, ladies. Let's start, shall we? So, Meghla and Margaret, I understand you just flew in exclusively for the summit today. Wow, from India and from all the way from Australia. I hope you're not too jet-lagged.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, perfect.
That's good. Yeah, we're not jet lagged, but very tired because we've been on the road for 2 weeks.
Right, and I hope you had some time to at least try your favorite Singapore dish here. I have to ask what is that one dish for you?
Liaw, hot pot.
Well, we have one right here in MBS, so let's hope you have a chance right after this summit to catch that, right? So let's get started. So why don't you start by giving us an introduction, right? What is the India Sourcing Network, and why did you start this?
Yeah, so India Sourcing Network is a B2B sourcing platform that helps e-commerce sellers, Amazon sellers from around the world to source products from India from vetted suppliers. And we also have a list of service providers that we have vetted on the network, as well as other support services that you might need, such as packaging companies, lawyers, freight forwarders. So any type of service that you need to source from India, you'll find on India Sourcing Network. And the reason we started this network is because, people don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. Of course, China is the main country for sourcing any products, but, with the trade war between China and the US, people were trying to diversify their sourcing. And so I had a lot of experience in sourcing from India, so then I thought, okay, let me help Amazon sellers source products from India. So that's how it started.
Sounds really comprehensive. So how many sourcing agents or providers do you actually have on the platform currently?
So in terms of suppliers, we're really focused on quality and not really quantity. So currently we've got about 150 suppliers, and all of the suppliers are manufacturers, so there are no trading companies. We vet the companies really well to make sure that they have their own factories and that they are export experienced. When you're sourcing from India, it's really important to make sure that you're sourcing from an exporter and not really a domestic focused company. And in terms of sourcing agents, we've partnered with about 3 sourcing companies in India so far, and we recommend those 3 companies mostly.
Yes, trust is so important. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit, how is the vetting process like?
Yeah, definitely. And we really, really focus on the vetting process because, there are other supplier directories like Alibaba and Global Sources. They verify suppliers, but they don't really vet suppliers. So there are 3 things that we really check. One, we make sure that they are legitimate companies. Second, that they have their own factories. And thirdly, that they are export experienced. We check their documents. We do, Zoom calls with them. We also visit their factories if needed. So there's a lot of effort that goes into vetting suppliers. And if there are any issues with any of the suppliers that you find on our platform, then we can also intervene and help with that.
Right. So let's also discuss broadly what are the different ways that a seller can get connected to a supplier.
Yeah, so there are different ways, and first of all, in India, you can just do a Google search because Google is not blocked in India like it is in China. So you can just type in to Google whatever product you're looking for plus manufacturer in India, and then you'll be able to, find some suppliers. Second, you can use export-focused directories such as Alibaba, Global Sources, and IndiaSourcing.net. These are the 3 main export-focused directories. You'll often find this directory called India Mart that comes up. Avoid India Mart because there are a lot of domestic-focused companies on India Mart. So stick to the export-focused directories. And then you can also, of course, use sourcing agents. They will help you find suppliers as well.
So what would be the key advantage of using a sourcing agent versus kind of directly going to find your own manufacturer?
Look, I think a sourcing agent can help you, particularly when you're new and you don't really understand what's involved with purchase orders and all the different steps that are involved. I think going to a sourcing agent initially is a great idea because they can help you. They will do, or locate a supplier who would fit the product that you want. They also will help you do the QC, they can help you with packaging, they can help you negotiate a price. So I think in that respect, for new people, it's quite good to start off with the sourcing agent and then maybe move on to going direct to a supplier as you get a little bit more confident, I think, in what you're doing and understand the process.
So that's really a good tip, I guess, for beginner sellers. So now maybe let's also just talk a little bit about like the differences, right, between like China and India, because everybody's starting point for sourcing, right, usually is to start to source and manufacture from China. So what's the kind of like the advantage of the Chinese manufacturing ecosystem, since both of you have experience, right, sourcing from both countries?
Yeah, so I have lived and worked in China for 10 years, and I have a really good understanding of how things work in China. And China is the world's factory, and I think it's going to remain, the world's factory for quite a few years. So by default, you would go to China. For some categories, there is no better sourcing production hub apart from China. For example, if it's anything that's electronics, even electrical appliances, for example, or gadgets, those products should be sourced in China because they have well-developed supply chains, they have competitive pricing, they have a lot of R&D, they're experts at those kinds of products. So if you're doing anything electronics, I would say stick to China. Don't even think about, there are other hubs like Mexico, Vietnam. Electronics and electrical gadgets should be sourced in China. But then there are certain advantages of looking at other hubs. So one of the things that you want to do is, diversification is important in any business. And that is one reason why you would go to a different production hub. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Like we've seen with COVID, there were so many disruptions in China initially with shipping and logistics and everything. And a lot of people were not able to source their products. So at least if you have another country where you're sourcing from, you're mitigating some of your risk. So that's one reason to diversify. And secondly, there are so many countries that have very unique products that are not found in China. So when you go to a different country, you're able to source those unique products, and that will help you differentiate your brand from other sellers, right? Mark, do you want to add more to that?
Look, I think definitely sort of diversification, and I found I was originally doing products from China, and at a fair I stumbled across some Indian products and I just fell in love with that complete difference. I'd been to Canton, couldn't find anything like that there. And that was where I just went, wow, I'm changing to this because I'm not going to have as many people, competing against me in exactly the same product. And 5 years on, I can honestly say nobody has my exact product on Amazon. So, it's the suppliers I find in India don't share your product, so it's not on Alibaba or anywhere where you can be just found. You have to really, in fact, my manufacturer doesn't even have a website, so you have to actually contact them and find out more about the product. So I find that, is a good sort of thing when you go out into a different country and get something that's not common off Alibaba.
Right, so you would kind of recommend like quite a category-specific approach, I guess, to the two countries?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of categories, India really specializes in certain categories. First of all, anything that is textile-based, specifically cotton, is really good in India. It could be furnishings, apparel, bedding, textiles, anything that's cotton-based. India is, in fact, the largest producer of cotton in the world. And also, labor costs are much lower in India. So anything that requires is labor intensive, that requires labor, can be more competitive in India. Other categories are leather products, including bags, belts, leather garments. Then we've got metal and wood, home decor items and home use items. A lot of these products are handmade and they are extremely high quality, and they can command higher prices because they are handmade. In fact, we just came from our India sourcing trip, and we went to a trade show where there are thousands of manufacturers of these home products. And all of the attendees were so surprised to see the quality of the products over there, because these products are manufactured by artisans who have been practicing these skills for generations. So these skills have been passed from one generation to another, and they are really experts in creating metal and wooden products. So you can find really high quality home use items such as bowls, trays, decorative items, candle stands, other functional and decorative items as well. And then other categories
eco-friendly.
Oh yeah, eco-friendly products.
Can't forget that.
Exactly. That's a huge category in India. And if anybody's looking to build a brand around eco-friendly products, there are so many different options. For example, there's this one brand that produces plant-based materials or bags made out of plant-based materials such as cactus leather, cork, and then we've got, what else for eco-friendly?
Oh, you've got plates.
Yeah, all of the disposable plates that we have that are made from, sugarcane waste or other type of areca palm leaves, for example. And sometimes you can also use packaging that is eco-friendly. Even if your product is not eco-friendly, you can maybe use some sort of packaging that is recycled or reused, and that can be, that can add to your eco-friendly kind of story. Also, a lot of companies in India, they try to produce in a sustainable way. So that's something that you can add to your brand story. And not only is the product eco-friendly, but even the way that it's produced is sustainable. For example, some companies, they run on solar panels. So, that's very sustainable and eco-friendly.
Yeah, and I think actually one thing that I noticed this time going to India was the packaging that they had, and I actually brought some home in my suitcase because it was like brown paper, but they'd cut it into a webbing type thing, and it was really, really compactable, so it would be great to put around a lot of products. So I'm going to keep that sample, and I'm going to use it a lot in the next 12 months to tell people. And another thing we found is a lot of people don't know, but you can actually get instead of a poly bag, it's made of cornstarch, so it looks like a poly bag, but it's actually biodegradable in 12 months' time. You put that in the garden, it's gone. So I think they're things that people need to take into consideration a lot more, and I think India is very big. I mean, Meghla's now living there, and you don't get anything delivered in a plastic bag anymore, do you?
That's really a great tip, because I think early in the morning we heard that U.S. consumers are a lot more eco-conscious now. So I think that's a really great tip, right, for those who want to penetrate the U.S. So I do want to ask too. So can you ask your sourcing agent to kind of find and source products for you that are kind of already ready-made, or if let's say you have like a specific specification, can you ask them to make it according to your specs?
Yes, look, you can do either. Look, you can either ask to look through some catalogues, like just say, I don't know, you want a metal jug. So you can sort of say to them, can you find me, I want it this shape, or can you find me all the different varieties that are available? Because what I find is because they're handmade, you can get, like probably 100 different styles of jugs. It might be the twists, the curves, the shapes, they might be round, they might be oval, and all that. So it's a matter of, if you can think of what you want, you can either get them to find something and maybe tweak it again. You might then want to change the shape of the handle. And because things are handmade, that becomes a lot easier. I mean, I've actually been to my factory and watched them make handles, and they particularly bend the metal, sit there on the ground and make each handle individually. So it doesn't have to be, done on a mould, and, it's not so expensive. So you can tweak things like that very easily on your product. So you can either do that, or you can get somebody, on Fiverr or a designer to actually design your product and take your design to a sourcing agent, and they'll go to the best place. So there's both options are available. Obviously, if you're doing your own design, it's going to be a little bit longer process, because, they've got to start from scratch and do the design. If you take something off the shelf and tweak it with a few changes, you'll probably be, getting your product a lot quicker.
Thanks so much. That's a really interesting tip from Margaret. And certainly, I think the top reason why people would approach sourcing agents, right, would kind of be to get the best quote, right? And since you have experience sourcing from both India and China, what are the pricing differences that you kind of see for, like, let's say, the same product category? Or should sellers have a very different expectation of pricing between the two countries?
So if you're comparing apples to apples, then the pricing should be kind of similar. For example, handmade products from India compared to handmade products from China are quite similar. But if you're comparing, handmade products from India with machine-made products from China, then of course the Chinese products will be cheaper. So it really depends on the product categories. Anything that is labor-intensive can be cheaper in India because labor costs are lower, and in China, labor and production costs have been going up. So for example, apparel, anything like bags, those kinds of products would be cheaper in India.
I think we also want to ask also about perhaps like the timeline expectations, right? Because I'm sure like all our sellers, right, here in the audience want to like launch tomorrow, but it takes time to source, it takes time to manufacture, it takes time to produce your products, right, according to specifications. So what is the timeline they should kind of like take into account, right? Like, let's say if they contact you tomorrow, like how fast will, let's say, the sample come, and then like how fast from there would kind of it take for a full batch to be produced?
Look, it depends on the product. If you're looking for, say, something like macrame or just a rattan bag or something that's quite quick to produce, that could be done in like 30 days. It might take you probably 2 to 3 weeks to get your sample done, depending on the complexity of what you want. But those products are usually produced in, 30 to 40 days. But if you're talking wood or metal, which is very laser intensive in most cases, because they start off with the raw wood and then they will actually shape the raw wood. It has to dry out. And then be made into the product. So that can usually, I would say the lead time for both metal and wood is more like, 80 to 90 days. So, but people cringe at that, but to me, it's just getting yourself organised. You've just got to think, right, I know it's going to take that long. So once you get your first batch, as soon as it's, hit Amazon and you can see it selling, you go, right, how many do I need? And you reorder. So it's just organisation and forward planning. Once you do it once, you're right. And it's like the big retail businesses don't just order for next week or next month. They're all ordering for, in fact, when we were at the factories, they were taking orders for 2024. So you do have to plan ahead. It's no good just thinking, I need it tomorrow and being impatient. And I think if you wait a bit longer, you'll get better quality than trying to rush something through and getting it checked properly.
Right. I think like definitely like quality over speed, like for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So I think like another top question that we always get asked, right, when you're sourcing from countries like China, from Vietnam, from India, is also some language barrier concerns, right? So are there language barrier concerns or even maybe like cultural differences that people should note?
Yeah, there are definitely cultural differences, and that's something that we also teach people on India sourcing trip. But in terms of communication, most of the suppliers that you speak to in India will speak English, so there's less of a communication barrier. And Marg, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, no, well, look, I found when we were sourcing from China, it was quite difficult with the language to communicate, and because I find now with India, you can jump onto WhatsApp or you can jump onto Zoom and the manufacturer will just come and talk to you and, I can say, do this, bend that, and it works quite well. But, when you can't see someone's face and you can't communicate, we had a couple of things go wrong really badly, like my packaging was twice the size it should have been and I didn't realise till it was in Amazon what had happened because they didn't read my design or they couldn't read it, so they just winged it through. But I find now that I can actually get on a call and speak, and I think it's quite different. The difference I find between China and India is that they're more family orientated, so they want to talk to you about, for the first half an hour, about your family and the dog, and we know all about grandpa and grandma and everything else. So it becomes more of a friendship than business. It's not, hi, I'm here, bang, and off you go. It's just, where's your order? They have more time for you. It's more relaxed, and I think you've got to get used to that. And we were laughing when we were away because we were doing things and we said we're doing it on India time because we were always 5 or 10 minutes late, onto the bus or something. It's just the culture is not such a rush. They're more, and they do have a work-life balance in India. They do not work on Sundays. They do not work at night. There's not many places doing 24/7. A few factories, the bigger ones, but they have a much more, I think, balance in their life, and a lot of family is very important.
Yeah, I think definitely for sure, like building relationships, right, and taking time to develop them is really important. Or even in Singapore here, right, even for a very westernized culture, we still have something called like face value, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really something interesting to note from a cultural viewpoint. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the India sourcing trip, right? So how often do you organize this, and how can our Singapore sellers get on board? When's the next flight?
Yes. So we organize this trip twice a year, every October, and in spring it's usually in March or April. And the trip is actually, it coincides with the trade fair that's held in Delhi, which is the handicrafts fair. And there are 3 aspects that we really focus on during this trip. The first is learning. So we teach people how to source from India. We do a full day conference. Then second is sourcing. So we actually bring you to the fair where you can talk to suppliers and source products. And we also bring you to factories to see how products are actually manufactured. And then the third aspect is cultural experience. So we do a Bollywood night where you get to dress up in Indian clothes and dance to some Bollywood tunes. And we take people to Agra as well, because we believe that when you do business with any culture, any country, it really helps to understand the culture, and that helps with business as well. So we try to combine business and leisure in the trip. And the trip is really focused on Amazon sellers, e-commerce sellers, and we have a number of coaches that join us from the US and Australia, and they actually help attendees select products, because that's one of the biggest issues that people have. Okay, there's so many beautiful products at the fair, but are any of these products Amazonable? And that's a term that we actually invented. We have to get it copyright now.
We might steal that.
And so that's what we try to help people, we help them find Amazonable products, because you want to make sure that there's enough demand for the product, you can find enough keywords, and it's not too saturated. So we've got our coaches, Margaret is one of the coaches as well. We've got Tim Jordan and a few others, and they walk around the fair with attendees and, help them understand how to select products. And then we also introduce you to all of the service providers like freight forwarders and sourcing agents, packaging companies. So we've got all of them at the conference when we host the conference, so that you can build relationships with them, so that when you need those services, when you start sourcing, then you've already met them. So yeah, the next trip is in March, in case anyone's interested. We're running a super early bird price as of now until October 30th. So you can get more information at indiasourcingtrip.com.
That sounds like a really experiential way to learn. Yeah. And do mark that down in your calendar. That's like after Chinese New Year, so everybody's pretty available, I hope. So last but not least, right? Definitely the top question every business owner likes to ask is like, so how much does all this cost, right? So how much do you charge for your platform, and how much do sourcing agents would usually charge? Is there like a component of fees that all of our sellers should note?
Yeah, so our online platform is free for buyers. I mean, you guys are buyers. And it's similar to any other sourcing platform where the suppliers pay us to be on the platform. So it's totally free for you guys. You can go on the platform, search for any company, and you can send them a message and then deal with them directly. As of now, we don't have transactions happening on the website, and we also don't have payment assurance, but we're going to be launching that pretty soon in Q1 of next year. And you heard that here first. So we are going to be launching payment assurance, which is very, very important, and no other platform in India is currently offering payment assurance. And then for the trip, of course, there is an associated fee, and it's an 8-day trip, all-inclusive. It includes the hotel, food, transportation, SIM card, the fair, conference, everything. And you can get more information about the fee on the website.
And do you intend to expand to any other countries?
Yes, we are actually in the process of looking at doing a trip to Vietnam in April this year, to a fair that's happening over there, and we hope to do a bit of a, I suppose, taste of Vietnam and go from Hanoi right down to Da Nang and down to Ho Chi Minh City. So it'll be a little bit different trip. It'll be a flight between the major cities, and visit some factories and visit the fair, and a little bit of culture as well, hopefully.
Wow, that sounds amazing. As a Vietnamese person, might I just say April is a wonderful month to visit Da Nang. There's an international fire festival there, but that's for the tourism board. So let's move on to take more sourcing-related questions from the audience. So we have questions that have been coming in. If you haven't had a chance to ask the questions, do ask them within the app or via the QR code. So we have a few questions here. So the first one is, right, let me just cast that on stage. Can you share the general process of how sourcing from another country works? The steps involved.
Well, the process is pretty much the same as you would the process from China. So first of all, if you have a specific product that you have designed, you can create a specifications sheet, and you can try to contact suppliers via various online platforms or via sourcing agent, and send the product specifications to the supplier, ask them to develop a sample, and once the sampling process is done, once you're happy with the sample that has been produced, you place an order. You would generally place a deposit of 30 to 50%. Don't ever give the payment up front, like all the 100% payment up front. That is, some security that you have. So pay 30 to 50% up front. And then once the production is completed, you can get a third-party inspection done. And once you're happy with the inspection, then you pay the balance amount, and then the product is shipped out to your country. So it's pretty much the same as when you would source from China. Yeah.
Right. And the next question is, sorry, just give me a moment. Right, this is kind of the opposite of what was asked earlier, but what product categories would you not recommend to source
that's a
from
great
India?
question. So one is, I would say, don't source electronics products from India as of now. The electronics industry is developing. There are a lot of mobile phone factories, for example, that are being set up, but these are mostly factories of large brands such as Samsung, Xiaomi, Huawei, Apple. All of these big companies have factories, and they're mostly catering to the domestic market, and some of them are being exported as well. But as of now, the electronics, like the OEM manufacturing, is not that developed. So there are factories that are doing OEM for larger brands, but not for small, mid-sized companies like we have selling on Amazon typically. So electronics, China. I think the other thing is plastic injection. If you have something that's plastic injection, there may be factories in India that do it, but then China would be more price competitive, and you'll have more options in China as well for for plastic injection. Anything that is natural or eco-friendly or handmade or labor intensive, that is good to source in India.
Yeah, and I think I suppose garments or a lot of, actually, the PET bottles, we haven't discussed those, have we? What they do is recycle all the plastic bottles and make fibre out of it, and we've seen some beautiful mats and bags and things, and that gives you a great brand story that you can have a pile of plastic bottles here and then it's turned into this beautiful rug or something, and I think those things are really good selling features for your brand story as well, so it's something worth pursuing, going down a different area that something different.
Yeah, thanks for that. Let's find another question. Right, so you mentioned earlier there were some platforms, right, that our sellers can go to. Can you kind of repeat kind of the export sourcing websites for India products that you kind of mentioned earlier?
Yes, definitely. So the first is indiasourcing.net. That is our website. You can say India Sourcing Network. So just Google India Sourcing Network or type in indiasourcing.net. That's one. Then we've got globalsources.com. Global Sources is actually one of the oldest B2B sourcing platforms, and I used to work for Global Sources previously. So they're, again, export-focused directory. And then we've also got Alibaba, of course. Yeah. Those are the three main export-focused sourcing directories or websites. I just want to add, Alibaba and Global Sources, they are not really India-focused. Like 95% of companies on both of those platforms are from China, but they do have some India companies. And what you need to do is, after doing a search for the product, you have to use the country location filter and only select India as the country. And that's when you will find, the Indian suppliers of that particular product.
Right, this is a really interesting question. do you actually check the environmental impact of the suppliers as part of the vetting process?
So we don't necessarily check this for each supplier, but many suppliers do have certificates, and they do go through some certifications and processes to be compliant with certain regulations. So if they do have any of these certifications, then we just vet the certification. But no, we don't ask them specifically, for any environmental impact processes. Yeah.
And I guess we have a lot of successful sourcing stories, but equally you also hear kind of every now and then some horror sourcing stories, right, on the forums, right, in a podcast for selling, etc. So what are the steps that the sellers might have be missing out on here, or are there certain steps that you would recommend that they just not cut back on? Is a factory audit important? Is the the QC process? Should you just pay extra attention and money for that?
I think you must definitely do QC, particularly when you're first starting out. If you find the factory yourself and it hasn't come through any of the sites, sometimes people just Google it and come up with the factory. I would, number one, even just start by Googling on Google Maps and seeing, does it exist? Is it a tin shed? Is it a beautiful big factory? What am I dealing with? To make sure at the very start. You can get, we have a QC company that will also vet factories, so you can pay to have that factory vetted to make sure it is compliant and everything that you're looking for. But then I think the most important, and it depends, if you're doing, say, a wood product and it's your first time, maybe you should get a QC done when the raw materials are ready to be started to be used, because there is a drying process, and so you need to make sure that that timber is dry and ready for manufacture. So, if you're starting out on your own, I think that would be a step, and that's what the difference between, I suppose, using a sourcing agent and doing it yourself. So you either pay the sourcing agent a fee, or you do all this work yourself and employ people to do those steps for you. I think that's the safest way. Meghla, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I also want to add that make sure that you vet the supplier really well and ensure that the supplier really specializes in the product that you're looking to source. So for example, if you're sourcing a wooden product, make sure that the supplier has the equipment to do it, that they have actually supplied wooden products to other brands. You can ask what other clients they have, and if they have well-established brands such as Walmart and some of the bigger retailers, then at least that yes, they are they're providing quality products. So you can ask for their previous clients. You can ask for any certifications that they might have. In India, sometimes there's this yes culture. So if you ask them if they can make a specific product, they'll say, yes, of course we can do it. And then they'll try to figure out a way, or they'll ask their, brothers, sons, nephews, whatever, to get it done. So you should try to make sure that they have the in-house capability to manufacture the product that you're looking to source. So try to find out what their core competence is, and then source that product from that supplier.
That's really interesting to hear. Yeah. And we have one question. I think you did allude to this earlier, but is there a way to get insurance for the products or for the sourcing process?
So as of now, there is no way to get insurance for the sourcing process. But that's something that we are looking to launch next year, and that's going to be more of like a payment assurance service that we're going to offer, so that you don't have to pay the supplier until you are really happy with the product quality that has been delivered.
Just on that, something that people were talking about insurance, that once you actually give your goods to the freight forwarder, make sure that you pay a little bit extra and get insurance. Most freight forwarders will offer that, but they don't always ask you. So if you just give them your, $20,000 order and it goes off to sea and a container falls off the boat, your money's at the bottom of the ocean. So for, the sake of it's about 5% or something of the value of your shipment, you can have that totally insured. So that's something that I think is very, very important to not forget to do, because that's a lot of money at stake.
I think another tip that I want to add related to logistics is that when you're shipping from India, you should ship to the east coast of the US, so New York. And the most common port from where shipments go is Mumbai. So that's on the west coast of India. And then the ship goes through the Suez Canal to the east coast of the US. So whereas from China, most of the shipments will go to the west coast of the US because that's closer. But if you're shipping from India, go to the east coast. The shipping time or the actual sailing time is around 21 days. And then if you add in the time at customs and maybe transportation from the factory to the port, it'll be around 30 to 35 days overall.
And we have this really interesting question coming. So after you go through the sourcing agent for the first time, can you kind of just bypass them, the subsequent rounds?
Well, I mean, you could technically do that because once the sourcing agent will, introduce you to the factory. So initially they will not introduce you to the factory, but once you place the order, you will know who the factory is. But I feel that sourcing agents provide much more value than just introducing you to the factory, because whenever you're sourcing, whether from China or India, you need to do continuous quality control. You can't just set and forget. In fact, there's one thing that is very common in sourcing. It is called quality fade. And what that means is that once you place repeat orders with the same supplier, the quality will reduce over time. And this is extremely common. So a sourcing agent will help you mitigate that risk of quality fade. And so, work with a sourcing agent as a partner and have them as your ears and eyes on the ground. And if there are any issues with the factory, they can help resolve the issues. They can also make sure that your products are delivered on time, because that can sometimes be an issue in India where there are, delayed deliveries. So the sourcing agent is always, following up with the supplier. So, I mean, technically you can bypass the sourcing agent, but we would say that if you've started working with a sourcing agent, just continue with them. And maybe it's a bit unethical as well.
Yes, and I think probably from the sourcing agent's point of view, they put a lot of work in that very first order. They would spend so much more time developing your product, checking and designing your packaging, helping you with your packaging, all those things. So then the second order should be a little bit easier for them, and that's where they start to make money. I think it's a bit like, you're not going to make money on your first Amazon order that you put in either, because you've got a lot of work to do to get, at ranking and everything. So it's the same for a sourcing agent. You've got to think they need that first run to break even, and then they'll start making money when you give them the second order. So I think, look, most of the sourcing agents we've met are so beautiful that you'd want to go back to them. They're lovely people, and, to me, money's made to go around, and you should share it with everyone and let them make their profit
really
as well.
interesting. Tips that you've shared. I'm sure you have a lot more questions for Meghla and Margaret, and they'll still be around today, so you can catch them at the India sourcing booth during the lunch slot session or at the networking session in the afternoon. And I hear they're giving something out there, so you definitely don't want to miss that. Thank you so much, Meghla and Margaret. Pleasure to meet you as always, and hope to have you back to hear more about your sourcing trip learnings.
I just want to add, come by our booth. We're actually giving away our India sourcing workshop for free just for today and tomorrow. So you can scan a QR code, and the workshop is 12 hours worth of content. It's for $279, but we're giving it away for free today. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.